Welcome back to the Donor Charm podcast, where we sit down with the nonprofit leaders, community builders, and change makers to talk about the work behind the mission.
Welcome back to the Donor Charm podcast with your hosts, Jordan Barron and myself, Andy Whatley. Today, we have the privilege of sitting down with Bob Wingo, a nationally respected marketing and business leader, co-founder of Sanders Wingo, civic advocate, educator, and mentor, whose influence has helped shape both business and community leadership in El Paso and well beyond. From building major brand campaigns to serving on boards and investing in the next generation, Bob's career has always centered around people, purpose, and impact. Today, we're going to focus on his work with the Hunt Business Career Plan, a mentorship program helping UTEP students think bigger, build meaningful relationships, and create intentional career paths that last far beyond graduation. So we're ready to go, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us. We are, of course, again with Bob Wingo and my co-host, Jordan Barron. Jordan, why don't you kick this party off?
Bob, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it. You're a national treasure from what Andy tells me, and so we're happy to have you here on the podcast with us.
I'm delighted to be here.
Well, first off, I wanted to start off by asking you about the Hunt Business Career Plan that you put together. I heard it was a phenomenal program, and we're here to talk about that and just learn a little bit more about it.
So let's back up a little bit. And the original concept was generated by Dr. Nachman almost 2 decades ago. And Dr. Nachman came up with the idea of how do we engage the business community to help our students gain a keener understanding of the workforce and the workplace and how to really get out and make those connections and really get a chance to see how that process is done. First thing I want to say is, the College of Business does a fantastic job of preparing students for their future. But the toughest thing is, which they really don't teach in school, is how to interview for careers. So Nachman came up with the idea. Layla Melendez and Mike Atkins were the two founders of running the program, and I got recruited. And during that recruitment process, we said we're going to do 4 sessions a semester, and I'd made a determination several sessions in that really wasn't enough depth and breadth to really give students the kind of insight that they needed. So as time went on, I started collecting data and information, and I created the plan. And the plan was a concept of working with kids, or young people, I should say, where you're helping them gain the insight that's needed to know what to do when you're going after the big interview. So what we did was I created like 30 interview questions and 10 very direct questions that students should be asking and thinking about and how to prepare for an interview. And when you go in and have that interview, making sure that you've done your homework and your background on the executive that you're going to be interviewing with, so that you are now prepared to do what needs to happen to take the nervousness out of your system. You've done your homework. And the key thing is, how do we turn the interview into a conversation?
I'm curious. Do you guys do things like video role playing, and does it get that hands on, or is it more based on lectures and that?
It was really based on the first part of the plan. The part that we did before we got into the real big plan was really like one-on-ones. And the most important component was, since I was taking my time, as well as many other mentors, to work with students, because many of the students had jobs. So I wanted to make sure that these kids had an opportunity to engage. So I did it on the weekends. I did it at night, after work, after school, so they had a chance to engage. And we went through the entire process, making sure they had a keen understanding of how this works and what they could do, how they then would sit down and go through these questions and be able to respond to these questions, how they could then go and talk to an executive about what they wanted to do for the rest of their lives. And as I told them, they're not looking for a job, they're looking for a career.
And what gaps were you seeing after working with them after a few sessions? What gaps were you seeing in like their ability to have those conversations prior to your guys' engagement with them?
Well, I think the biggest thing that students, they really didn't understand the process. I mean, one of the things that I always got a chuckle out of is I would say, what are you going to do when you go to that interview and they say, how much do you want to make? And they freeze.
Yeah.
I said, and here's the answer, or part of it anyway. Ma'am or sir, I've done my homework. This is an organization I want to build a career with. I've looked to the left and the right of you and the folks below you, and I realize there's an opportunity to gain experience and there's upward mobility within the organization. All I can tell you right now is I promise that I'll do my very best to give you everything I have to help this company to the next level. And in regards to income or pay, that's up to you. And the reason we put it that way is that way you don't place yourself too high. You also don't place yourself too low. You place yourself in a spot where you really have a chance to really get that career opportunity you're looking for.
Yeah, that makes total and complete logical sense. I'm curious, and I know obviously you focus on long-term career, not just getting a job. Mm-hmm. We get that, and the reasons are pretty obvious. Sure. But how do you accomplish that? How do you get them to focus on career versus I'm just looking for my entry-level job? Well,
what I do is I tell them you're going to do some homework sessions here. You're going to go on who do you emulate? Who is someone that you feel is critically important to your future or could be? How have you really looked at where you are today and where you want to be? How do you make sure that you have narrowed your focus in terms of this is direction and the career path that I want to take? Now, I'll say one thing, irrespective of this is the last opportunity you ever have, you're looking at it as a career, because if you look at it as a job, you just 1 in a million. If the interviewer sees you as a career component, they're going to see you as someone that has greater interest. And after you've gone through the whole interview process, the last thing you do when you're walking out that door is you write a handwritten note thanking them for the opportunity to come to visit. It's not an email. It's not a text message. A letter can come later, but that's what you do. And in terms of the salary component, you evaluate what's been offered. And if it's not something that fits your framework, you move on to something else. But what you haven't done is you haven't closed the door on the opportunity.
Yeah, and I feel like that's super important because I feel like our like the newer generation coming into like the workplace is a little disenchanted with the corporate world and like the idea of having this corporate life where you don't necessarily get a gold Rolex at the end of your career path anymore, let alone like a pension or anything. So how do you make it personal with your employer, and how do you have that personal touch that allows them to be successful within their organization?
I think one of the first things I always tell students when I'm talking to them, if I were going to go interview executive X, I would say, go on LinkedIn, go on Facebook, go into all these different platforms where you can find out as much as you possibly can about them. Find out what they do for fun. Find out what they do when they're not working. Find out what they do when they are working. Do they have families? Where do they like to vacation? What are the fun things? Do they cycle? Are they working out? All of a sudden, when you bring these things to bear, the person that you're interviewing with realizes that you've invested the time and energy and effort to understand a lot more about them and about the company. It already elevates your opportunity for success.
A good friend of mine's son just finished his master's, and he called me up and said, "Hey, Andy, would you talk to me about like interviews and like that?" And I said, "Sure, come on over." So he came to my house on a Saturday morning, and we sat down and chatted. And he goes, "One of the things I'm really having struggles with when I'm in an interview is when they say, 'Hey, look, you're just out of school, you have zero experience. We have a lot of applicants that have 2, 3, 4, 5 years experience.'" He goes, "How do I deal with that? Because I'm not sure what to say." And I said, "Well, that's a really good question. How do you respond to that?"
Well, again, I think the key thing there is, look, I'm coming here. I've got a 3.0 or better GPA. I worked my tail off in school. Somewhere down along the line, you had to have your first opportunity for employment. Somebody gave you a chance. I'm telling you, if you give me an opportunity, I'm going to do a great job for you. I'm going to build a career path that takes me to the next level in this organization. But I have to have the opportunity. One of the fondest moments I had in phase 2 of this was a student walked up to me and said, "I really want to meet that CEO to see if I can get an internship. But I'm nervous that, come on, we're going over there right now." So we go over and meet the CEO, and she says, "Sir, I'd like to have an opportunity to talk to you about internships." And he said, "Right now, I really don't have any internship opportunities available." And this is where she blew my mind. She goes, "How about if you let me come and shadow for 3 or 4 sessions so I can at least learn about your company at no cost to you. She got to do it. Guess what?
Turned into a paid job.
She's employed now.
Yeah.
Smart.
It's one of the best stories I've ever heard.
One of the things I added, it just hit me when we were talking about it, and I hadn't really kind of planned to say this to him, but I said, but one thing you may want to point out after pointing out your history in school, your performance, your grade point average, and how well you've done in school, but you might want to say, some way to look at this also might be, Mr. Johnson, this is an entry-level position. If a person comes to you who has 4 or 5 years experience, they're applying for an entry-level position, one of the fears that you may have is that person's probably not long for this job, because the moment they get a job that's commensurate with their skill level and their experience level, they're out of here. Because now I'm going to come join you as a first-time employee, and I'm here because I want to work for this company. I want to build a career here. And he kind of thought that was kind of a good approach too.
Yeah, because that's an investment.
Exactly.
The company's making an investment in the individual, and the individual is also making an investment in the company.
Right.
It's a two-way street.
Yeah, exactly.
Value given and value added.
And so when it comes to the mentorship program, how do you coach someone into advising them how not to make the mentorship feel transactional, and make it more of a relationship that you build with somebody?
The wonderful thing is, after we got through phase 1 of the plan, and I sat down with Rolando Nunez and Cynthia Payadas, who work for the College of Business under Dean Harjamarku. And I'm on the advisory board, and I showed them the plan, and they said, this is really cool. How can we elevate this into something much more significant? So we sat down, and I got to tell you, Cynthia and Rolando did an incredible job of helping build a framework for a 6-session quasi-curriculum event that happened with the university. And we had it at the Graduate Learning Center in the Sunflower Bank building. We had 6 of these sessions, 2 hours each. We had 22 mentors from all sections of business here in El Paso, from banking to finance to healthcare to AI-driven initiatives across the board. Now these students had an opportunity to listen to the panel of executives with multiple decades of experience and understand the key investment that they're getting from these executives, of knowledge that they're gaining by sitting there listening to them. And they told their stories. And then after that, we broke up into smaller sessions where each of these executives had 5 or 6 mentors for 15 or 20 minutes, and then they would switch. They had an opportunity to sit there and ask them the key questions about business and careers and direction and goals, and how do I do what do I need to do, and what were some of the things that you had to overcome? How did you get past this roadblock in your career? And these people had an opportunity to really share some incredible experiences.
Well bet. I've known you a long time, and I've known you've always been very committed to mentoring students and being involved with UTEP. And I wonder where that comes from. I mean, just on a personal side, I'm curious what drives you in that. Did something happen in your youth or in your educational process that maybe drove you to caring so much about working with young people? How'd you get there?
Well, I just think it's critically important to give back. I mean, I had mentors that helped me. It wasn't structured like this, but they made a big difference in my life and my career and my business direction. And when you sit back and think about it, I mean, it wasn't a planned scenario like I'm just talking about. But what it was a chance for me to understand from people that had already gone through this how to get to the next level. I'm a marketing guy, an advertising guy. So I wanted to make sure I had a keen understanding of how that worked. And working with guys like David Sanders, who founded the agency. Dave was a tough guy. Dave was a very successful guy. His son, Bill, even more successful than him, with LaSalle Partners and the other things that Bill did. But the bottom line is, giving back is very important. Getting to a point in your life and your career where you can give back and share and impart some of the knowledge that you've learned over the years with students and others, so they really have an opportunity to go, wow. I helped over 50 students one-on-one and two-on-one over almost 2 decades. And then we came up with this concept. 25 students had to sign up 25 students had to have a 3.0 or better. 25 students had to sign an agreement that would go to all 6 sessions. These 25 students walked away with a different perspective about business, careers, relationships, connections, and it's not networking, it's connecting.
Right.
It's meeting with people that have the ability to say, hey, I've got Andy Whatley's phone number. I'm going to call Andy for you. And right away, that's an entry point that they would normally not have.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the students that we went through this big 6-session process with already have jobs.
That's awesome. And how important is it when you're building your career and building those relationships to be involved, I guess, with the community outside of your organization or through your organization? I'm on a couple of boards, especially like Young Leaders Society, where a lot of the participants and advisory board members are there through El Paso Electric, or they're there through one of their other organizations. Is that something that a young professional, like still in college and at UTEP, should be focused on?
Maybe not so much in college, but certainly shortly thereafter, for certain, because the first thing I did when I finished, I shouldn't say finished, I went to work in the apparel business, but as soon as I left the apparel business and went to the agency business, the first thing I volunteered for was a Sun Bowl. I became Volunteer of the Year because I sold more tickets, I did more things, and also what I did was I built my virtual Rolodex with cell phone numbers of people. When somebody calls and they go, well, I need to talk to so-and-so. No, this is a personal matter. I need to talk to Joe. Joe was expecting my call. Just tell him it's Bob Wingo. And that way, I mean, from the Sun Bowl Association to bank boards, to the Community Foundation Board, to the YWCA capital campaign, to working on major things at the state level because of people like Ted Houghton and Paul Foster and Woody Hunt. And you look at these guys and they go, we need more people involved at the state level. I got to be on the Finance Commission of Texas, an appointment by Governor Bush. I got to be on the Economic Development Board for 6 years. I chaired it for 3. We brought ADP here when I was on the board.
I think it's especially fortunate for the students in your program mentored by you, because I consider you to be the Jedi Master of all things networking and connecting your Rolodex to opportunity. I don't think there's anybody I've ever met that is better at that than you are. You are.
I don't know about that.
No, you are. I know you're not going to admit to it, but you are a Jedi Master at that. And I watch you and I think, I aspire to be like Bob when I grow up.
We all want to be Bob when we grow up.
Well, it's all giving back. It's all somebody gave to us, and now we give to somebody else. I mean, I look at people like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and people like that on the financial side of things, guys that have done incredible things. Look at Charlie Munger. He had a $90 billion or plus net worth when he passed away. Where do the funds go? I have no idea. I'm sure he had a master strategy on where it goes. I look at the investment when you talk about the Woody Hunt College of Business. Woody Hunt. What Woody Hunt's done, what Paul Foster's done, what Paul Foster just did for the athletic program.
Right.
I mean, the things that people do to give back is incredible. And it's not just me, it's many, many others that are doing it. Ted Houghton is the guy that got me involved at the state level.
Yeah.
I sat down with Ted and I said, I want to be involved. And I said, but I want to be on something that's meaningful, that we have an opportunity to create visibility for El Paso, not just for the state in total, but for El Paso as well. And Ted got me in front of the right people, and I got on my first board, and I ended up on the Higher Ed Coordinating Board, Cancer Research Institute Board. So I was on 4 big Texas boards, which I was very, very happy about.
And for someone like you who's worked on a global scale and especially a national scale in business, I have found myself that El Paso is really unique when it comes to having the ability to have access to these mentors, these types of mentors, these guys who operate on a state, on a federal level, and they live here in El Paso, they work here in El Paso. You have the opportunity to attend a mentorship program like yours and speak to these guys. I feel like that's a really rare opportunity that's only El Paso kind of provides, because you can't really necessarily do the same thing in New York or Dallas unless you're already working within a certain circle or framework.
It's funny you say that because, a couple of things happened. We had the office here in El Paso, and I got on those state boards, and I started looking at what was happening in Austin, Texas. You had GSD&M, one of the best national ad agencies in the country, and many others, HAN, Public Relations, and more. But the bottom line was, it opened my eyes to looking at those connections from a governmental perspective, meeting with a lot of people from all over Texas, meeting with business people, getting to know the folks at GSD&M, which gave us an opportunity at one point to do some work with Southwest Airlines, and then AT&T. And then eventually we had an office in New York City for 17 years doing a lot of business and working with General Motors, working with AARP and U.S. Postal, Mini Cooper, Burger King out of Florida, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We've had a chance to work on a lot of things. And again, it's all about relationships. You talk to people that can make decisions and that can pull the trigger on opportunities. You get to know those kind of folks. We got our big opportunity with AT&T on the media side because of the president of AT&T. I got to know him, his kids a little bit at meetings.
Sure.
Big meetings pop up. And then the opportunities popped up when things switched around a little bit, and bam, we had a chance to do a lot of work. And we had 2 people at one point in time embedded in the GM Tower in Detroit. Again, it's all about the relationships.
Yeah. What kind of results have you seen? I mean, you've been able to watch this over the years and see how these students are performing. I don't know if you had a control group that weren't mentored versus those that were, but I'm just curious your gut instinct on what kind of results you really have had and the impact it's had, this mentorship program.
Well, I've had a number of students that have been now in business for a decade, and some of them are excelling and doing wonderful things. Some of them get back to me, some of them don't, and that's okay too. But the bottom line is, if we make an investment in the future of young people, one of the key things too that was a turning point, in my opinion. Now, this is going to be weird because COVID was a bad thing, but it was a turning point where now it doesn't matter where you live. Most of your calls and work, Microsoft Teams, Zooms, whatever, all these different messaging architectures to get across an opportunity to meet with people. I've got people all over the country now working with us.
So Jordan, why don't you come up with the finale question? What are you most curious about that we want Bob to share with us today?
His Rolodex, for one.
Actually, he doesn't know, but I've already clipped it.
No, but on a serious note, for somebody who operates on a high level but is gracious enough and humble enough to come and sit down and have this conversation with us here in our podcast studio, what's something, if you could share one piece of advice for the young professionals coming into the world that are going to listen to this, what's one thing that you want to let them know about?
I think a couple of things. Number one would be, look at life through your own eyes and not the eyes of others. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Always be humble. Never get above your skis in terms of who you think you are or think you're going to be. And that's what I'm really impressed with some of our very, very wealthy people who live in El Paso. They treat people with respect and dignity, and they give back. And the key thing for me is, if we can teach people to give back, hopefully from the students that we're going through now, and we're going to have another fall cohort, there'll be some AI components tied to that, which we're already working on. It's making that kind of a difference. It's giving back. It's not just taking, it's giving back. It's helping others. How do we keep our people here?
I've always loved the notion of, pay it forward. And I think a lot of people here do subscribe to that. And I think it's so important. And also seeing us be able to retain some of that talent here in El Paso, which is wonderful to have them stay here in the community where they grew up and maybe they want to live. And of course, some move on and they're happy doing that too. So it's okay.
But you know what? That's why we did this whole program, because when you sit down in front of 22 executives, and every single one of them had over 15 or 20 years experience, all of a sudden these students are going, there's opportunities here I had no idea of. They've built relationships now with 22 executives who have the ability to connect them to others. So now they've got a chance to go, hey, Mr. So-and-so, can I call you? Can I email you? can we have a coffee or whatever? And the answer is going to be 90% of the time, you bet. Because these mentors, some of them went to multiple sessions. We had some sessions that had 6 or 8. We had some sessions that had a lot fewer than that, but we had a good turnout on every single session.
Well, Bob, we really do appreciate your joining us on the Donor Charm podcast. We pretty committed to working with different nonprofits throughout the community, throughout the state, throughout the country. We're opening in Mexico next, so we're pretty ambitious about working with nonprofits and people that give back by nature of what they do. So this kind of fits in with that whole kind of notion of doing something that makes a difference, and we're all part of that. So we really do appreciate you.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And again, a big shout out to the Dean, PhDs up there at UTEP, Cynthia, Rolando, Dr. Harjamarku, and others that have given so much and continue to look at ways to improve and add value. And how do we really create the opportunities to keep more students here earning a meaningful income and adding to our community?
Beautiful.
Bob, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for watching.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Donor Charm podcast. At Donor Charm, we believe fundraising is more than just a transaction. It's about building trust, strengthening relationships, and giving people a meaningful way to support the causes they care about. We hope today's conversation gave you practical ideas, fresh perspective, and a little inspiration to bring back to your own organization, board, event, or campaign. To learn more about Donor Charm and how we help nonprofits create better donor experiences, visit donorcharm.org. Until next time, keep building connections, telling meaningful stories, and creating impact that lasts.